Episode 36 of the Mr. Men book readings. Mr. Men in Scotland. Mr. Strong had always wanted to go to the Highland Games in Scotland. He was going to compete in the caber tossing event, a sport that was ideally suited to Mr. Strong as it was all about strength, tossing a tree kind of strength. He invited his friends to come too. They left a few days before the competition and planned to see the sights along the way. Mr. Strong had trouble packing his caber. He can't fit a caber in a case. They all caught the train to Scotland. On their way to Edinburgh, they passed the Forth Bridge. Then was curious, wondered what had happened to the first, second and third bridges. Mr. Clever explained that it was named after the River Forth. Little Miss Curious thought for a moment. So, what happened to the river first, the river second, and the river third, she asked. Mr. Clever sighed. It was going to be a very long day. The next morning, Mr. Uppity went to make Mr. Lazy. Get up, he yelled. We are going for a walk up the Royal Mile to see Edinburgh Castle. A mile? I can't walk a mile, cried Mr. Lazy. And he turned over and went straight back to the street. Mr. Uppity marched the others up the streets of the Royal Mile where they had a great view of the castle on its rock. Mr. Lazy also enjoyed a view of the castle. A view from his bed, through one eye, one half closed, that sleepy eye. That's clever, innit? In the afternoon, little Miss Splendid wanted to visit a woolen mill to find a sightseeing outfit. She looked truly splendid in tartan. Mr. Rush wasn't really the right shape for a kilt. Had Mr. Silly got into a tangle with his? A tartan tangle! The next day they drove to Glasgow to visit the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum. They saw so many things. There was an elephant and an Egyptian mummy and paintings and sculptures and dinosaur skeletons and suits of armour, and there was even an aeroplane hanging from the ceiling. Mr. Rush rushed round and saw everything, and Mr. Lazy saw a lot less. He was asleep. After exploring the cafe, little Miss Greedy wanted to visit the cafe. You should try a haggis, suggested Mr. Clever. What's a haggis? Asked little Miss Greedy. It's a Scottish cow, said Mr. Nonsense. No, cried Mr. Clever. It's a food like a giant sausage. A giant sausage, said Mr. Nonsense. Don't be ridiculous. But of course Mr. Clever was right, and little Miss Greedy enjoyed her haggis, and then she enjoyed another one, and so on. It was time to head to the games. On the way, little Miss Curious spotted a Highland cow. Now that's a haggis, announced Mr. Nonsense, which was, of course, nonsense. It looks like a mini woolly Maloof, laughed little Miss Sunshine. But it's as shaggy as Mr. Clumsy, but not as clumsy. Ow! Cried Mr. Clumsy, who had sat on a thistle. I bet that hurt. Mr. Clever insisted on a quick stop at the St. Andrew's Golf Club, one of the oldest in the world. Scotland is the home of golf, announced Mr. Clever. Mr. Clever knew an awful lot about the history of golf. He knew an awful lot about the rules of golf. There was one thing he did not know about golf. How to play. Oh dear. But there was one last place to visit before the games, a very long lake called Loch Ness. It was even longer than Mr. Tickle's arms, which were as wiggly as Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. Many people think that Nessie is a Scottish myth and doesn't exist. But if that is true, then who is Mr. Tickle tickling? I know, we know, don't we? The next day they arrived at the Highland Games. The games opened with a marching band of pipers and drummers. Mr. Noisy had never heard bagpipes before. He was very impressed, but Mr. Quiet was not so impressed. I don't blame him. There were all sorts of games to watch and all sorts of games to join in. There was the Highland Dancing competition for Little Miss Somersault. There was the tug-of-war for Mr. Greedy. Nobody could move him. And there was the hammer throw for little Miss Dotty, although her hammer didn't count. That's a silly ring, isn't it? And then it was the caber toss event. Mr. Strong's moment had arrived. Mr. Strong took a long run up, and then with all his might, he launched the caber into the air. It rose into the air, tumbling end over end, and landed far down the field. Where did it land, I wonder? With a loud crack, it split in two. Mr. Strong had snapped his caber. He was too strong even for caber tossing, which made him the strongest man in the world. Mr. Strong was very pleased. Be careful if you shake hands with him. He'll most likely crush it. And then it was time to go home. As the train pulled out from the station, there was a loud, terrible noise from the back of the carriage. "Oh, help!" cried Mr. Jolly in terror. "The wheels have fallen off, the carriage is derailed, and the train is going to crash!" But it was none of these things. No, it was Mr. Noisy. He had bought a souvenir. And do you know what it was? I'll tell you. Bagpipes! Good, we don't have any bagpipe music in this one. Well, we'd be covering our ears, wouldn't we?